At dinner, my son James said loudly, "You're a loser, but Mom's new husband is not." I didn't say anything, but I was deeply offended. A week later, James was without a car, money, and a roof over his head. That same evening, my ex called me in a panic, and she said something that changed absolutely everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. At the family dinner table in our cozy Davenport home, the aroma of roast beef still lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of mashed potatoes cooling on plates. It was a typical spring evening in Iowa, the kind where the windows were cracked open to let in the fresh breeze from the Mississippi River nearby. James, my 30-year-old son, sat across from me, his fork stabbing at the remnants of his meal with more force than necessary. Adeline, my 28-year-old daughter, was to my right, her warm smile trying to keep the peace as always. We'd been chatting about nothing in particular, work, the weather, the budding lilacs in the backyard, when James suddenly slammed his utensil down, the clatter echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You're a loser, Dad," he said loudly, his voice slicing through the air like a knife. "But Mom's new husband? Dylan's not. He's got it all figured out. Big business deals, fancy cars, the works. I think I'll start calling him Father from now on." The words hung there, heavy and sharp. I felt a jolt in my chest, like someone had punched the air out of me. My grip tightened on my glass of water, the condensation slick under my fingers, but I didn't say a thing. Not yet. Adeline gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The family photo on the wall behind James caught my eye, a faded snapshot from 10 years ago. All of us smiling at a backyard barbecue, back before the divorce shattered everything. How could he say that, after everything I'd done? "James, that's not fair," Adeline shot back, her voice steady but edged with hurt. She leaned forward, her chair creaking slightly. "Dad's been there for us our whole lives. He's the one who built this family, not some outsider. You're being cruel." James snorted, pushing his plate away so hard it nearly slid off the table. "Cruel? Come on, sis. Look at him. Still slaving away in construction at 62, scraping by. Dylan's a real success story. He knows how to win. Dad, he's just average." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, the sound grating on my nerves. I sat there, stunned into silence, my mind flashing back to a moment from years ago. It was right after the divorce, when Anne left me for what she called a better life. James was 20 then, fresh out of college and floundering. I'd handed him the keys to a brand new Honda Civic. Nothing flashy but reliable, something to get him started. "This is for you, son," I'd said, proud as could be, but he'd wrinkled his nose and muttered, "Thanks, I guess. But Dylan's got a Mercedes." That sting had faded over time, buried under the daily grind of supporting him, paying his rent, covering his bills while he chased one half-baked scheme after another. And now this? "James, sit down," I finally managed, my voice low and even, though my jaw clenched tight enough to ache. "We're family. We don't talk like that." He laughed, a bitter bark that didn't reach his eyes. "Family? Yeah, right. You've been holding me back, Dad. Dylan's the one who gets it. He's offering real advice, real opportunities. You're just obsolete." With that, he grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and stormed toward the door, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards. Adeline reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Don't listen to him, Dad. He's wrong. You're the best father we could have. He's just, I don't know, jealous or something." Her words were a balm, but the wound was fresh. She stood too, giving me a quick hug, her arms warm and reassuring. "I'll talk to him later. Love you." Then she followed him out, the front door clicking shut behind her, leaving the house in eerie silence. I stayed seated, staring at the messy table, the half-eaten plates, the crumpled napkins, the roast now congealing in its juices. My mind raced, piecing together the betrayal. How had it come to this? James living rent-free in the house I'd bought for him, driving the car I'd maintained, all while cozying up to Dylan, that slick 55-year-old businessman who'd swooped in after the divorce. Dylan, with his tailored suits and smug grin, always whispering in Anne's ear about how he'd elevate the family. But me? I'd been the one pouring concrete on the Iowa heat, building not just houses, but a future for my kids. The photo on the wall mocked me now, a reminder of happier times. The clock ticked softly in the kitchen, each second amplifying the emptiness. I didn't move to clear the dishes, didn't even stand. Instead, I let the anger simmer, turning it over in my mind like a stone, feeling it sharpen into something resolute. I thought of every late-night shift, every skipped vacation to cover his bills, every time he'd thrown Dylan's name in my face. Enough was enough. If James wanted to call me a loser, he'd learn what life without my support looked like. It was time to draw the line. The night air in the backyard was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming lilacs from the neighbor's fence. I left the table as it was, the lights still on in the dining room casting a warm glow through the sliding glass door. Grabbing a beer from the fridge, the cold bottle sweating in my hand, I stepped outside, the wooden deck creaking under my weight. The stars were out in full force above Davenport, twinkling like scattered diamonds against the velvet sky. I popped the cap with a satisfying fizz, the foam bubbling over slightly, and took a long sip, letting the bitterness match the one building inside me. Pacing the yard, the grass damp from an earlier spring shower, I couldn't shake James's words. They echoed in my head, each repetition fueling a fire I'd long kept banked. Sitting on the old patio chair, the one I'd built myself years ago, its paint chipped from seasons of use, I stared up at those stars, my mind drifting back. It was like they were pulling memories out of me, one by one. I remembered the day I bought James that house, 5 years after the divorce. He was 25, bouncing from job to job, always with excuses. "Dad, I need stability to get on my feet," he'd said over the phone, his voice pleading. So I did what any father would, dipped into my savings, put down the payment on a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet suburb not far from here. The mortgage was in my name, of course. His credit was shot. "This is your chance, son," I told him as we stood in the empty living room, the fresh paint smell strong in the air. He'd grinned, slapped me on the back, but within months, the payments started coming from my account. Alone. "Just this once, Dad," became "just until I land something big." And Dylan? He'd been lurking in the background even then, taking Anne on lavish trips while I footed the bills for our kids. Another sip of beer, the cool liquid grounding me as indignation rose. Flashback to last Christmas. James unwrapping the envelope I'd given him, inside a check for his car repairs. "Thanks, but Dylan's talking about investing in my ideas," he'd said dismissively, folding it away. Dylan's ideas. Always Dylan's. That man had charmed his way into my ex-family's graces, positioning himself as the hero while I was the foundation they stood on. But tonight, under these stars, something crystallized. I wasn't going to let this slide. Fairness had been my guiding star all these years, working overtime in the construction yards, the dust caking my boots, all to give them what I never had. James's greed, his disdain for my generosity. It was time he learned what life without it felt like. I crushed the empty can in my hand, the metal crumpling with a sharp crinkle, and set it on the railing. The first light of dawn was hinting at the eastern horizon, turning the sky from black to a soft gray. My eyes hardened as I watched it creep in, purpose settling over me like the morning dew. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, I rose early, my body fueled by the resolve that had solidified overnight. The backyard stars had faded, but their clarity lingered in my mind like a map guiding my next moves. I skipped breakfast, grabbing only my keys from the hook by the door, the metal cool against my palm. Sliding into my old pickup truck, the engine hummed to life with a familiar rumble. Cutting through the quiet Davenport morning, dew clung to the windshields of parked cars along the suburban streets as I drove toward James's neighborhood, the one I'd chosen for its safety and proximity years ago. The air was fresh, laced with the scent of wet grass, but my focus was sharp, no second thoughts, just action. Pulling up to the curb outside his house, I noted the Honda Civic gleaming in the driveway, its hood still shiny from the last wash I'd paid for. The house itself looked lived in but unkempt, curtains drawn against the morning light. I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel path, and knocked firmly on the door. 3 solid raps that echoed my determination. Inside, I heard shuffling, then the lock turning. James opened the door, his hair tousled, eyes bleary from what must have been a late night. He was in rumpled pajamas, a far cry from the confident man who'd hurled insults at dinner. "Dad, what are you doing here so early?" he mumbled, rubbing his face, surprise mixing with irritation in his voice. I didn't mince words, standing firm on the porch. "I'm here for the car keys, James. Hand them over." He blinked, then laughed, a forced, incredulous chuckle that grated like sandpaper. "What? No, that's my car. You gave it to me." "Gave it to you," I repeated, my voice steady, though a flash of memory hit me as I glanced at the Civic. It was the day I'd surprised him with it, pulling into our old driveway with the new car, bow on the hood like in those commercials. He'd been 22, jobless after dropping out of community college. "This'll get you started, son," I'd said, beaming, but he'd shrugged, saying, "It's okay, I guess. Dylan's got something flashier in mind for me someday." That casual dismissal had stung, but I'd brushed it off, wearing money for insurance every month since. Now, under the morning sun, that memory fueled my resolve. "It's registered in my name," I continued, pulling out the folded registration from my pocket, the paper crisp. "I've paid every bill, every repair. It's mine, and I'm taking it back." James's face hardened, his stance shifting as he gripped the doorframe. "You can't just show up and take it. That's theft." I stepped closer, my gaze level with his. "No, son. Keeping it without permission, that's theft. Give me the keys or I'll call the police right now. Let them sort it out." He hesitated, eyes darting to the car, then back to me. A neighbor across the street paused while watering her flowers, glancing curiously our way, the hose dribbling water onto the sidewalk. The tension built, birdsong in the trees contrasting the standoff. Finally, with a muttered curse under his breath, James disappeared inside, returning with the keys dangling from his hand. He thrust them at me, his fingers trembling slightly. "Fine, take it. But this is low, Dad. Real low. Dylan's right about you. You're just bitter." I took the keys without a word, feeling their weight, a small victory in my palm. Sliding into the driver's seat, the leather familiar under me, I started the engine. It purred smoothly thanks to the tune-up I'd funded last month. James stood on the porch, fuming, arms crossed as I backed out. In the rearview mirror he grew smaller, but the fire in his eyes lingered. Driving away, the streets of Davenport unfolding before me, past the budding maples and quiet homes, I felt a surge of momentum. The dashboard clock ticked forward, and my thoughts shifted to the next step. Downtown wasn't far, and the bank opened soon. This was just the beginning. The drive to downtown Davenport took me along familiar routes, the Mississippi River glinting to my left under the rising sun. I parked the Honda in the bank's lot, the asphalt still cool from the night, and grabbed my folder of documents from the glove box. Statements, deeds, all meticulously organized. Walking through the glass doors, they swung open with a soft whoosh, reflecting the clear spring sky. Inside, the lobby was hushed, the tile floor echoing my boot clicks as I approached the teller's counter. A young woman in a neat blouse looked up, her computer screen flickering with the bank's logo. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" she asked, her tone professional and neutral. I placed my ID and the mortgage papers on the counter, spreading them out methodically. "I need to cancel the automatic payments on this account. It's for a property I own, but the residence arrangement has changed." She nodded, typing into her keyboard, the clicks rhythmic. As she reviewed the details, my mind wandered briefly to the day I'd signed those papers. James had been there, lounging in the real estate office, flipping through his phone while I initialed page after page. "Thanks, Dad. This place is perfect," he'd said offhandedly, not even looking up. I'd covered the down payment from my overtime savings, the construction dust still in my pores from long days on site. Anne had been gone by then, off with Dylan, but I'd wanted to give James a stable base. Now, as the teller asked for confirmation, that memory underscored the necessity of this step. "Everything checks out," she said after a moment, printing a form. "You'll need to sign here to stop the transfers. We'll notify the resident via mail, but it might take a few days." I signed with a firm stroke, the pen gliding smoothly. "That's fine. Thank you." As I gathered my papers, my phone buzzed in my pocket, an insistent vibration that cut through the lobby's calm. I stepped aside to a quiet corner, near a potted plant with glossy leaves, and answered. It was James, his voice exploding through the line before I could speak. Dad, what the hell? The bank just called, said payments are stopping? You're evicting me? This is my house. I kept my tone even, gripping the phone tighter, the plastic warm against my ear. It's my house, James. My name on the deed. My money keeping it afloat. You were never a tenant on paper, just a guest I allowed to stay with every bill in my name. You've had years to step up. His breathing was ragged, the anger shifting to something desperate. You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? This is cruel. You're ruining my life over one comment? One comment? I echoed, pausing as a passerby in the lobby glanced over, overhearing the raised voice on speaker. It's years of taking, son. Years of me building while you lean on Dylan. Time to stand on your own. He pleaded now, his words tumbling out in a rush. Wait, Dad, let's talk. I didn't mean it. Dylan's been helping, but please, don't do this. I hung up, the click final, but his desperation echoed in my mind. Sliding the phone back into my pocket, I felt a text alert vibrate, likely from him again, or maybe someone else he'd roped in. As I pushed through the bank doors, the sunlight hit me squarely, and I wondered who he'd turn to next. Back home, the familiar creak of the front door greeted me as I stepped inside, the bank's paperwork still tucked under my arm like a shield. The drive from downtown had been uneventful, the Honda handling smoothly on the winding roads along the river, but James's desperate voice from the call lingered in my ears, a nagging echo. I set the keys on the kitchen counter, the metal clinking against the granite, and poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot I'd set to brew before leaving. Steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the rich aroma that grounded me amid the chaos. As I settled into the armchair in the living room, sunlight filtering through the half-drawn curtains in golden shafts, my phone buzzed again, a text notification lighting up the screen. It was from Adeline, her message popping up with a soft chime. Dad, James just called me freaking out. Said you're cutting him off completely? What's going on? I sipped the coffee, the heat spreading through me, and typed back quickly, keeping it brief, just reclaiming what's mine. He'll be fine. But before I could set the phone down, it rang, Adeline's name flashing. I answered, leaning back in the chair, the fabric worn from years of use. Hey, sweetie, I said, my voice steady. Dad, talk to me, she replied, her tone laced with concern, words tumbling out in a rush that betrayed her worry. James is ranting about the car and the house. He said he's going to Dylan for help, that Dylan's already talking about handling you. Something about teaching you a lesson. Are you okay? Her words hit like a fresh wave, but I kept my grip loose on the mug, letting the information sink in. Dylan, always Dylan, that 55-year-old snake in a suit, maneuvering from the shadows. I paced to the window, peering out at the quiet street where kids rode bikes in the spring warmth, their laughter faint. I'm fine, Adeline. James is just lashing out. Tell me more. What did he say about Dylan? She hesitated, her breath audible over the line. He mentioned Dylan offering to cover the mortgage temporarily, but only if James cuts ties with you completely. And? Dylan laughed about it, said you've been a pushover too long. James is buying into it, Dad. He's angry but desperate. I nodded to myself, the pieces clicking. Of course, James would run to him, the man who'd slithered into our lives right after the divorce. My mind flashed back as I stared at a faded photo on the mantel, one of all four of us at a 4th of July picnic before everything fractured. It was a year after Anne left. Dylan had shown up at James's birthday dinner, uninvited, with expensive gifts, a watch that outshone the toolkit I'd given. Your dad's great at building houses, Dylan had said with a wink, but I'm here to build futures. James had beamed while I'd swallowed the insult, wearing extra money the next month for his tuition. That pattern, my sweat equity dismissed, Dylan's flash embraced, had repeated. Emails in my inbox showing transfers I'd made, ignored thank yous stacking up. Adeline, thanks for the heads up, I said, my voice firming. Dylan's playing games, but I'm not backing down. This is about fairness. I know, Dad. Just be careful. James sounded serious. We chatted a bit more, her support a quiet anchor before hanging up. I scrolled through old texts from James, timestamps revealing months of requests for cash, No mentions of gratitude. The betrayal deepened, but so did my clarity. Pacing the room now, the floorboards creaking underfoot, I cross-checked a few emails on my laptop, patterns of Dylan's influence emerging, subtle digs in family group chats I'd been excluded from. A distant door slam from a neighbor echoed, reminding me of slammed opportunities in the past. The alliances were forming against me faster than I'd anticipated, and as I set the phone down, my thoughts turned to fortifying my position, strategies bubbling up unbidden. The phone vibrated again almost immediately, jolting me from the swirl of ideas. I glanced at the screen. Anne's name, my ex-wife, flashing insistently. The living room felt suddenly smaller, the steam from my cooling coffee dissipating into the air like fading illusions. I answered, standing by the window where the neighborhood's calm mocked the storm brewing inside. "Roy, what on earth are you doing?" Anne's voice burst through, frantic and accusatory, each word pitched higher than the last. "James is hysterical. He says you took his car and stopped the house payments. Have you lost your mind?" I took a breath, gripping the windowsill, the wood smooth under my fingers. "Hello to you too, Anne. I haven't lost anything. I reclaimed what's legally mine, the car I bought, the house I financed. James has had plenty of time to step up," she sputtered, the line crackling with her emotion. "But he's your son. You can't just throw him out like this. Dylan and I are worried sick. He's talking about getting lawyers involved if you don't fix this." Dylan again, pulling strings through her. I walked a slow circuit around the room, passing the photo on the mantel, my steps measured to counter her rush. A memory surfaced mid-stride. Right after the divorce papers, when Anne had moved in with him, I'd kept the support flowing, extra for James's braces, vacations I couldn't join. "Dylan's got big ideas for the kids," she'd said once over a custody call, her voice light. I'd signed another check, building silently while they paraded success. Now her panic revealed the cracks. "Lawyers?" I responded, my tone even, laced with quiet steel. "Let him try. Everything's in my name, Anne. This isn't about cruelty, it's about respect. I've built everything James stands on." And she paused, then shifted, her words softening to a plea. "Roy, please, for old time's sake. James needs stability. Dylan says you're being unreasonable. He's willing to help, but only if you back off." I stopped pacing, jaw tightening as the daylight waned slightly behind gathering clouds. "Dylan's help always comes with control. Tell them both, I'm done being the silent provider. James learns now, or he keeps leaning forever." Her voice cracked, desperation creeping in. "You don't get it. He's threatening to cut you out completely. We're family, Roy. Fix this before it's too late." The call ended with her hanging up first, the silence ringing louder than her words. I set the phone, grabbing a notebook from the drawer, the pages crisp as I flipped to a blank one. Ideas surged, consultations, countermeasures, my pen hovering, ready to map the path forward. With the notebook still open on the passenger seat, its pages filled with scribbled notes from the frantic call with Anne, I fired up the truck's engine, the familiar growl cutting through the quiet afternoon in Davenport. The spring sun hung low, casting long shadows across the dashboard as I pulled out of the driveway, flipping through my phone's contact list at a red light downtown. And my thumb paused on the lawyer's number, an old acquaintance from construction deals gone south years ago. No time for hesitation. The alliances against me were tightening, and I needed fortifications. The light turned green, and I accelerated toward his office on the edge of town, the river's gleam visible in the rear view, a reminder of steady currents beneath the surface. Arriving at the modest brick building, I parked and stepped inside, the waiting room scented with fresh coffee from a pot brewing in the corner. The receptionist nodded me through, and soon I was shaking hands with Tom, the lawyer, his grip firm across a desk cluttered with files. "Roy, what's the trouble?" he asked, leaning back in his creaky chair, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. I laid out the essentials, the car reclamation, the mortgage halt, the brewing threats from James and Dylan, keeping my voice level, hands folding the notebook open to key points. "I need to know my protections. Assets are in my name, but they're talking lawyers. And Dylan's business. Any vulnerabilities there?" Tom scanned the deeds I'd brought, his pen tapping rhythmically. "Smart move consulting now. The house and car? Solid. Your ownership's clear. But if they push for emotional distress or undue influence, we'll counter with records of your support." He paused, flipping pages. "As for Dylan, public records show his companies had some tax liens. Nothing major, but leverage if he escalates. I'll draft cease and desist letters just in case." We dove deeper, his questions probing like a foundation check. "Any shared accounts? Joint ventures?" I shook my head, but a memory surfaced as I waited for him to photocopy documents. The day Dylan first met James at a family event post-divorce, handing him a business card with a slick smile. "Stick with me, kid. Your dad's good with hammers, but I build empires." I'd overheard, swallowing pride while signing another check for James's rent. Now Tom's advice crystallized that into strategy. "File for full title transfer on the house. It'll force their hand." Leaving with a folder of prelim drafts, the hallway's echo mirroring my solitary steps, I felt empowered, the weight shifting. But one stop wasn't enough. I drove straight to the accountant's office across town, the truck's tires humming over familiar potholes. Parking in the lot shaded by budding oaks, I entered the sterile space, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ellen, the accountant, greeted me with a nod, her desk a sea of spreadsheets. "Roy, long time. Sit. Tell me about these ties." I spread the financial statements, pointing to transfers and mortgages. Cutting off support to my son, but Dylan's circling. Review for loopholes. Shared anything I missed? She adjusted her glasses, keys clacking as she pulled up digital records. "Your accounts are clean. No joints with James. But Dylan's firm? I've seen filings. Some irregularities and deductions. If you're thinking audit flags, the IRS loves tips on that." Her tone was matter-of-fact, but probing. "Why now? Family fallout?" "Respect overdue," I replied, jotting her suggestions. "Freeze ancillary credits. Anonymous reporting channels." As she printed summaries, my mind flashed to a winter years back, wiring money for James's failed startup, while Dylan advised from afar, pocketing consulting fees I'd indirectly funded. Ellen's insights turned that resentment to tool. Secure your retirement funds first. Then if they sue, countersue for repayment of gifts. By the time I left, the sun dipping lower, my folder thicker with annotated files, strategies coalesced. Heading home along the river road, mental checklists ran. First implementations tomorrow. The truck's cabin filled with purpose, but as I turned into the driveway, a new alert pinged on my phone, hinting at the storm's approach. At my desk that evening, the folder from the meetings lay open under the lamp's warm glow, papers rustling as I sorted them into piles. Legal on left, financial on right. The house was quiet, afternoon shadows lengthening across the wooden floorboards, but my focus was laser sharp. I logged into the online portal first, fingers flying over the keyboard to initiate the title transfer on James's house, double-checking addresses against the deeds. The cursor hovered over Submit. A brief pause as satisfaction bloomed. Click, and it was done. Confirmation email pinging like a starting gun. Next, the certified mail. Envelopes sealed with notices of asset freezes. Stamps affixed with deliberate presses. I addressed one to James, another to Dylan, care of his business, the ink flowing steadily. As the printer whirred, spitting out copies, a flashback intruded. Dylan's smug entry at Anne's remarriage party, toasting to new beginnings, while James hung on his every word, my quiet contributions forgotten in the champagne fizz. That fueled the next step, logging into the IRS tip line anonymously, typing details Ellen had flagged, questionable deductions, dates pulled from public filings. Submit again, the screen's glow reflecting my steady gaze. Pacing to the window while awaiting email receipts, I noted the neighborhood winding down, kids called in for dinner, lights flicking on like watchful eyes. Back at the desk, I monitored inboxes, subtle signs emerging. An unread message from the bank confirming holds, a delivery tracker for the mail. Tension coiled in the weights, but each action built the wall higher. Then, as I sealed the last envelope, my phone lit up with an incoming alert from James, his name flashing urgently, the vibration rattling the desk. The computer's ping echoed sharply in the quiet room, cutting through the evening hush like an unwelcome intruder. I leaned forward, the cursor blinking impatiently on the screen as I clicked open the email from Dylan, subject line screaming in all caps, Cease your interference immediately." His words poured out in a torrent of legalese and fury, threats of lawsuits for harassment, claims I'd overstepped on assets that belonged to the family he'd co-opted. My coffee mug sat nearby, a faint stain marking the document beneath it, a small imperfection amid the mounting storm. Before I could formulate a reply, my phone rang, Dylan's number flashing. I answered, putting it on speaker, the device vibrating slightly on the desk. "Roy, you old fool," Dylan's voice boomed, slick with that businessman polish now cracked by rage. "What do you think you're doing? Freezing accounts and meddling in my life? You think I don't know you're behind all this trouble with James? You'll regret dragging my business into your petty grudge." I stood, pacing to the window where streetlights flickered on in the Davenport dusk. "Petty? I've reclaimed what's mine, Dylan. Years of my sweat funding your shadow empire. Threaten all you want. My lawyer's ready." He laughed, a harsh bark that grated. "Your lawyer? Please. I've got teams that eat guys like you for breakfast. Back off, or I'll bury you in court costs. James doesn't deserve this. You're destroying him out of jealousy." Jealousy? The word triggered a flash. The first time Dylan hosted a family barbecue at his sprawling home, years after the divorce, James laughing at his jokes while ignoring my call about a job lead I'd arranged. I'd built the bridges. He'd stolen the crossings. Destroying? I'm teaching, Dylan. Something you never did. Real responsibility. The call escalated, his threats piling on. Restraining orders, countersuits, until I cut him off mid-rant. "Save it for the judge." Click. The silence rang, but it didn't last. Heavy knocks pounded at the front door, vibrating through the house like thunder. I moved to the entryway, peering through the peephole. James, disheveled, hair wild, eyes blazing under the porch light. Opening the door a crack, chains still latched, I faced him. "James! Not a good time." He shoved against the door, the wood straining. "Let me in, Dad. This has gone too far. You took my car, my house, and now Dylan's saying audits? You're ruining everything." I unlatched, stepping back as he barreled in, his breath heavy with frustration. The living room lamp cast shadows across his reddened face, highlighting the bags under his eyes. "Ruining? You've ruined yourself, son. Leaning on me while calling Dylan father? Time to stand." He jabbed a finger at me, voice rising in jagged peaks. "You don't get it. Dylan's helping, offering a place, loans. You're just bitter because Mom chose better. Admit it." Bitter. Another echo of that barbecue where Anne had whispered to me, "Dylan's good for us, Roy. Move on." I'd moved on by funding James's life from afar. Now, in the heated air between us, I held firm. Chose better, I chose you. Every paycheck, every sacrifice. Dylan's help is control. Walk away from it or face the consequences alone. James paced, knocking a photo frame askew, the old family shot tilting. "Consequences? I'm homeless because of you. Fix this, or I'll join Dylan's suit. We'll take everything." The standoff peaked, his shouts bouncing off walls. My responses calm barbs. "Sue away. Truth's on my side." Finally he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I watched from the window as he climbed into what must have been Dylan's loaned car, tires screeching as he sped off. The night settled, but the air hummed with unfinished business, repercussions brewing just beyond sight. As the taillights faded into the dark, a delivery van rumbled up the next morning, its engine idling while the driver hopped out with a stack of mail. I stepped onto the porch, the spring sun warming the crisp envelopes he handed over, official seals glinting like badges of progress. Back inside, I slit one open at the kitchen table, foreclosure notices spilling out, James's house entering proceedings, eviction timeline stark in black ink. Driving by the property later that day, the Honda's engine purring steadily, I slowed near the curb. Moving trucks idled in the driveway, workers hauling boxes under a cloudy sky, James directing them with slumped shoulders. The once neat lawn showed signs of neglect, weeds pushing through cracks, like the cracks in his facade. I didn't stop, just observed from afar, a quiet satisfaction settling as the reality hit him. My phone buzzed mid-drive. James again. I pulled over near the riverbank, water lapping softly against the shore, and answered. "Dad, please." His voice cracked, a far cry from last night's fury, laced with raw desperation. The eviction notice came. I'm packing everything. Nowhere to go. Dylan's place is temporary, but help me out, just this once. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather worn under my fingers. A memory surfaced. James as a boy, maybe 10, clutching my hand after a storm knocked out power, depending on me to fix the world. I'd wired the generator, built the safety net. Now that boy was buried under years of entitlement. This once? It's been a lifetime of onces, son. Learn from this. Build your own, he bargained, words spilling in a frantic stream. I'll apologize. Cut Dylan out. Anything. Don't let me end up on the street. The plea tugged, but I held the line. Apologies don't rebuild respect. Stand up, James. Call when you're ready to. I hung up, the river's flow mirroring the inevitable pull of consequences. Consulting my lawyer via a quick text update, he confirmed. Proceedings advancing, James's attempts to stall failing. Later, filing away the notices in my desk drawer, the papers whispering as they settled, my thoughts expanded to Dylan's exposed flanks, his business audits looming, whispers of irregularities surfacing. The net was tightening, phases unfolding beyond James. With the papers from James's eviction neatly filed, their edges still sharp like unresolved edges in my mind, I grabbed my folder and headed to a quiet cafe downtown in Davenport. The spring air carried a hint of rain as I parked, the truck's door clicking shut behind me. Inside, steam rose from a fresh latte on the corner table, mingling with the soft murmur of patrons flipping newspapers. I sipped slowly, the warmth grounding me as I dialed my lawyer, Tom. The phone pressed to my ear amid the clink of cups. Roy, updates? Tom's voice came through, crisp and ready. I've got the reports Ellen flagged, Dylan's tax discrepancies, those shady deductions from last year's filings, I said, flipping open the folder, pages rustling softly. Time to activate. Anonymous tip to the IRS or through channels. He paused, papers shuffling on his end. Both. I'll handle the formal complaint through my contacts. Compliance issues like these can trigger audits fast. Send me the packet. We'll mail it certified today. I nodded to myself, jotting notes on a napkin, the pen gliding steadily. As I scanned the incriminating summaries, some overstated expenses, questionable offshore links, a memory surfaced. Dylan's arrogant toast at a holiday gathering years back, glass raised high. To building legacies, he'd said, winking at James while I stood in the background, my construction-calloused hands hidden in pockets, after wiring funds for their trip. He'd interfered then, positioning himself as the visionary. Now I'd exposed the cracks in his foundation. Hanging up, I emailed the scans from my phone, the upload bar filling methodically. Outside, the cafe's window framed the bustling street, cars humming by like the gears turning in my plan. Later that afternoon, monitoring from home, I noted the first ripples, a local business news clip on my laptop mentioning whispers of investigations into Dylan's firm, clients pulling out amid rumors of fines looming. Dylan dodged my test call, voicemail clicking on after 2 rings, his usual slick greeting, now terse. A voicemail from him arrived that evening, his tone evasive, edged with strain. Roy, whatever your plan stop. We can talk. Settle this quietly. I didn't respond, instead cross-checking databases for more leverage, the screen's glow illuminating my steady resolve. His hasty restructuring attempts surfaced in public records. Asset shifts, but too late. Penalties were mounting, his empire wobbling. The silence from his end grew, a partial victory humming in the quiet house as I set down the phone. Driving home under the fading light, the river glinting beside the road, my thoughts wandered to potential apologies, the weight of justice settling like dusk. A tentative knock echoed through the house that evening, pulling me from the kitchen where dusk settled softly, casting long shadows across the counters. I approached the door, peering out. James stood on the porch, his posture slumped, a hesitant shadow against the twilight. Opening it, the cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of impending rain. James, I said evenly, stepping aside. Come in. He entered slowly, hands shoved in pockets, eyes downcast. The living room lamp flickered on as I switched it, warming the space with a gentle glow. He lingered near the mantel, glancing at the old family photo, before speaking, his voice low and halting, each word weighted with remorse. After a sleepless night at Dylan's, Surrounded by his cold luxury, James had faced the truth. Dylan's help came with strings, his promises empty compared to the years of my quiet sacrifices. The weight of the eviction notice had finally broken through his pride. Dad, I messed up. Badly. The eviction, crashing at Dylan's, it's all hit me. I took everything for granted, called you a loser while living off your work. I'm sorry. Truly. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, letting the admission hang. A flashback flickered. James, as a teen, beaming after I built his treehouse, our shared laughs under summer skies, joys Dylan could never claim. Now that innocence was tempered by growth. Words are a start, son, but actions? You've leaned on crutches too long. He nodded, pulling out a small envelope from his jacket, a handwritten letter, edges folded carefully. I know. No more handouts. I've got a job interview tomorrow. Manual labor, like you started with. He's pulling away too after the business hits. I see now he was using me to get at you. The door opened again, Adeline arriving unannounced, her key turning softly. She stepped in, sensing the moment, her presence a supportive anchor. Dad, James texted me. Everything okay? James turned, voice cracking slightly with vulnerability. Sis, I'm owning up. Dad's right. I need to build my own way. We sat then, around the table, a quiet meal of sandwiches I'd prepared, plates set with deliberate care. Adeline nodded encouragingly, her words gentle. It's a step, James. Dad's always been fair. I forgave him there, a firm handshake sealing it. No sentiment, just boundaries. Your family, but support ends here. Earn it. Dylan stayed silent, no contact signals clear in his absence. As James left, promising change, Adeline hugged me. Proud of you, Dad. Later, archiving old files in the drawer, their rustle a symbolic close, I stepped to the backyard, gazing at the stars twinkling above, toasting silently to new beginnings. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,